The text came in at 2:14 on a Thursday, while I was sitting in my car outside a rental warehouse with 3 cases of Candle Hurricanes in the back seat. Don't come on Saturday. Evan's family thinks it's better if you sit this one out. Please don't make this harder than it already is. I read it twice. Then I looked up at the warehouse sign, at the gray metal door, at my own reflection in the windshield. I had spent 11 weeks building my sister's engagement party from scratch, and she had managed to uninvite me in 23 words. What got me wasn't even the insult. It was the phrase "sit this one out," like I was some unstable extra who needed gentle handling. Like I hadn't paid the venue deposit 3 days earlier. Like the florist wasn't still waiting on my final chandelier measurements. Like the caterer didn't have my name at the top of every invoice. I set the phone face down on the console and let the air conditioner run. I remember noticing stupid details. A coffee stain on my shirt cuff. A crack in the vinyl around the gear shift. The warehouse kid in a neon vest pushing a dolly across the lot. Everything looked strangely sharp. That usually happens to me right before a problem stops being emotional and becomes logistical. I didn't call her first. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, warm and distracted, the way she sounded when she already knew the subject and had chosen her position in advance. "Hey, sweetheart, did you get the brass candlesticks?" Lila said the gold ones looked cheap. I almost laughed. My sister had been demoting me in private while my mother was still assigning me decor corrections. I got a text from Nora, I said. A pause. Not long, but long enough. "Oh," she said. That one syllable told me everything. I asked, "Did you know she was planning to tell me not to come?" My mother exhaled softly, like I was forcing her into an unpleasant administrative task. "Daniel, you know how tense things are right now. Evan's parents are very particular. They're traditional, they're image-conscious, and Nora is trying to keep everyone calm. She told me not to come to my own sister's engagement party. It's not your party." That landed harder than the original text. For a second I couldn't say anything. The warehouse lot shimmered in the heat, and all I could think was that I had designed the floor plan, negotiated the rental package, talked the chef into reworking the menu twice, and somehow this was not my party. My mother kept going, very smooth, very practiced. "You have to stop taking everything so personally. This is one evening. Be gracious. Help from a distance. Help from a distance." That was my family's favorite arrangement when it came to me. Useful, but not central. Dependable, but somehow embarrassing. The one who could solve problems, absorb costs, smooth rough edges, and then quietly disappear before the nice photos started. I said, "Did she tell you why?" Another pause. She said, "Evan's mother thinks you can be cold." I stared at the steering wheel. Cold. That was a new one. Not when Dad had chest surgery and I spent 6 nights at St. Thomas with a laptop on my knees, answering emails from the hallway because my mother couldn't handle the insurance paperwork. Not when Nora lost her condo financing 2 years earlier because she ignored 3 lender deadlines and I spent a whole weekend untangling it with her broker. Not when our aunt died and everyone was too upset to deal with probate. So I took unpaid leave for 4 days and sat in a courthouse annex explaining family relationships to a clerk named Denise who kept calling me baby because I looked tired. Cold. My mother said, "Daniel, please don't start listing old grievances. This is exactly the kind of energy Nora is trying to avoid." I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. Then I sat there with both hands on the wheel and let the pattern line itself up. It hadn't started with the engagement party. It almost never starts where people think it does. Nora was 31, 2 years younger than me, and very good at making selfishness sound delicate. She never demanded. She framed. She would say, "I just feel safer when you handle it." Or, "You're so much better at these things than I am." Or my personal favorite, "I knew you'd understand." When we were kids, that made her charming. By the time we were adults, it had become a system. The first clean example was my father's 60th birthday dinner. Nora volunteered to organize it, then forgot to confirm the private room. She cried in the restaurant vestibule while my mother hissed at the hostess. And somehow, I ended up moving 23 people across town to a steakhouse where a college friend managed events. My father thanked Nora for pulling it together. I was the one who paid the deposit. The second was the condo mess. Nora had decided a week before closing that she wanted custom drapery, a built-in bar, and imported sconces she'd seen online. When the lender asked for updated asset statements, she was $6,000 short because she'd burned through her reserves on finishes for an apartment she did not yet own. I loaned her the money to stabilize the file. She paid me back in chunks over 10 months and told people I'd help with some forms. The third was smaller, but somehow worse. Last Thanksgiving, Evan had come for dessert. He was polished, broad-shouldered, expensive watch, the kind of man who said actually too often. My mother was showing him baby photos when she got to one of me in high school, all elbows and bad hair. Nora laughed and said, "Daniel always looked like the before picture." Everybody smiled in that uncomfortable family way, and Evan added, "Good thing he found spreadsheets." I remember setting down my fork very carefully because if I'd answered honestly, dinner would have ended early. I work in event finance and operations for a hospitality group. I am not glamorous. I am the person venues love because I read contracts, catch overtime clauses, and know how many bartenders the fire code actually requires. I can walk into a room and tell you where the service bottleneck will be before the first tray passes. None of that impressed Evan, whose career and private wealth had convinced him that visible money was the same thing as substance. Still, when Nora got engaged in May, she came to me. Not to our mother, who liked ideas but not execution. Not to Evan, who thought events happened by force of preference. To me. She cried when she asked. She said she didn't want some generic hotel ballroom thing. She wanted it beautiful, controlled, intimate, expensive-looking without actually being expensive. She wanted 68 guests on the river terrace at the Fairmont House, strings of soft lights, garden roses, live jazz, family warmth without family chaos. She wanted past hors d'oeuvres instead of a buffet because buffets made people look provincial. She wanted a champagne tower, even though I told her those were more trouble than they were worth. I should have said no then. Instead, I took out a yellow legal pad and started asking questions. By the end of that week, I had done what I always do. I built a system around her emotions. The terrace was only available because one of our hotel partners knew me and trusted me not to let things become a circus. The rental company gave me a break because I bundled linens, glassware, and staging through a vendor I'd used before. The florist agreed to a lower minimum because I promised a clean install window and a realistic labor plan. I paid the initial venue hold on my own card because Nora said she was waiting for funds to clear from an investment account Evan was repositioning. That part mattered later. At the time, it just felt like another family bridge I was expected to become. 3 days after my mother's call, I met Nora in person. She chose the place, of course. A cafe in Green Hills where the chairs were too low and everything on the menu came with microgreens. She arrived 12 minutes late, sunglasses on, phone in hand, not looking especially ashamed. She sat down and said, "I'm glad you came. I wanted to hear it from you." She took off the sunglasses, folded them neatly, bought herself a few seconds. I didn't mean for the text to sound harsh. It told me not to come. She flinched a little at the plainness of that. Good. Sometimes simple language does more work than anger. She stirred the untouched iced tea the server brought her. Evan's parents are very formal. There's a lot happening with their side of the family. Some people have certain expectations. About what? She looked at me then, directly. About presentation. I said nothing. She lowered her voice. "Daniel, you can be intense. You don't always read a room the way you think you do. And after what happened at Thanksgiving was your fiancé insulting me in my parents' dining room." She pressed her lips together. "This is exactly what I mean. You always make things rigid." Rigid. I leaned back and looked at her properly. Cream blouse, engagement ring lifted just slightly every time she moved her hand. That careful face she used when she wanted to sound reasonable while saying something cruel. Then she said the honest part. "Evan's mother thinks you make people uncomfortable because you're always evaluating them. And honestly, Daniel, your energy doesn't match the tone we want." I said, "My energy. You know what I mean." I did. I absolutely did. She meant I was 40, unmarried, not flashy, not charming on command, and not willing to worship money just because it arrived in a better suit. She meant I knew too much about their actual finances. She meant Evan hated that I had quietly noticed the engagement ring had been financed, not purchased outright, because he accidentally forwarded me the jeweler's installment confirmation when I was collecting addresses for invitations. I had never mentioned it. But sometimes people can feel when you've seen through them. I asked, "Do you still expect me to run the event?" She blinked. Just once. But it was enough. "We've all put so much into this," she said carefully. I would hope you wouldn't punish me over a seating decision. That was the moment something in me cooled all the way down. Because there it was. Not guilt. Not apology. Not even embarrassment. A seating decision. As if my exclusion were just a placement issue. As if she were asking me to switch tables, not erase myself. I said, "You want my work. You just don't want me visible." Her face hardened. "I think you're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I think I'm being clear." I stood up, put enough cash on the table to cover the coffee I hadn't finished, and left her there with the microgreens and the expensive ring and the expression she got whenever a script stopped working. That night, I booked a room in Maui. Not impulsively, quietly. The party was on Saturday, June 18th. My flight left Friday evening at 7:40. I did not tell anyone. The next morning my father called, and because I was still stupid enough to believe clarity might matter, I answered. He didn't ask how I was. He went straight to numbers. "Your mother tells me you're sulking," he said. "I'm not getting into the emotional nonsense, but there's another issue. Evan's parents are putting in $25,000 toward the honeymoon and setup costs. It would be appropriate for you to contribute something meaningful." I thought I'd misheard him. Meaningful? You're her only sibling. 10,000 would show good faith. I actually laughed then. Not loudly. Just once. My father hated that sound. "What's funny? You're asking me for $10,000 one week after Nora told me not to attend. This isn't about attendance. This is about family standing." Family standing. My father had a phrase for every kind of coercion. When I was 26 and turned down a job he liked because I wanted a role with more autonomy, he called it short-term ego over long-term standing. When I refused to co-sign Nora's lease after she'd already missed 2 car payments, he called it abandoning your responsibilities. He loved the language of principle because it let him avoid the uglier truth, which was that he believed my resources were part of the family inventory. I said, "No." He went quiet in that dangerous way he had. "Be careful, Daniel. There are moments people remember." He meant punishment. He always did, when he used the word remember. After I hung up, I went to my office, closed the door, and pulled every engagement party file onto the conference table. Vendor agreements, insurance certificate, load and schedule, staffing chart, terrace permit addendum, floral schematic, liquor liability rider, final catering revision. The whole thing. That was when I saw the shape of it with complete clarity. Not emotionally, structurally. The venue contract was in my name because the private club would not reserve the River Terrace without a guarantor they already knew. The event insurance was under my company umbrella because Nora had missed the deadline to secure a standalone policy. The floral install required the site representative listed on the safety form to be physically present for the overhead suspension approval. That site representative was me. I sat down very slowly. Because suddenly the text message looked different. Not crueler, more foolish. By noon I had a legal pad full of notes, and one more realization I hadn't expected. In a folder clipped behind the venue contract was the reimbursement sheet Nora had signed 3 weeks earlier when she promised to repay the initial deposits in full by June 10th. She had signed and dated it herself in my office. June 10th had come and gone. She had not repaid a cent. I stared at that page for a long time. It wasn't a fortune, just under $8,400 across deposits, rush fees, and a specialty linen order she insisted on because plain ivory looked funeral adjacent. But it was enough to stop being symbolic and become real. Enough to prove that I wasn't imagining the pattern. Enough to remind me that love without boundaries becomes an invoice no one intends to pay. At 4:30, I called Marianne. Marianne was our company's outside counsel, 62 years old, silver hair, dry voice, impossible to rattle. She'd helped on hotel claims and once talked a groom's uncle out of threatening litigation over a bourbon shortage by reading the contract back to him line by line until he got embarrassed and hung up. I explained the situation without embellishment. She listened, then asked 3 questions. "Are you named as guarantor?" "Yes." "Are you named as on-site operations lead?" "Yes." "Were you disinvited in writing?" "Yes." She said, "Then you need to stop thinking like a brother and start thinking like a responsible contracting party." I looked down at the reimbursement sheet under my hand. Marianne went on. "You cannot be excluded from an event while remaining personally exposed for compliance decisions during execution. That is absurd. You either control the event or you formally withdraw and notify every vendor in writing that authority has transferred. And if it all falls apart, A beat. Then it falls apart under the people who chose appearances over competence. I thanked her and hung up. Outside my office window, downtown Nashville was turning gold with late sun. I could hear somebody laughing in the hallway. A printer kicked on in accounting. Normal sounds. Ordinary life. And in the middle of it, my sister was still assuming I would keep carrying a structure she had already told me I didn't belong inside. I opened my laptop. First I pulled up the flight confirmation to Maui. Then I opened a blank email and typed the florist's name. My finger hovered over the keyboard while my phone buzzed with a new message from Nora. Are we still good for Saturday? Evan's mom wants the ivory taper candles switched to cream. I read that once, and then I smiled for the first time all week. Not because I was happy, because I finally knew exactly what I was going to do. I didn't answer her text. I sent the florist an email first, then the venue manager, then the caterer, then the rental company. I kept every message short, formal, and impossible to misread. Effective immediately, I was withdrawing from all on-site coordination and execution responsibilities for the June 18th event. Any further approvals, changes, payments, or operational decisions needed to go directly to Nora and Evan. I attached their contact information. For the venue, I added one more line. Since I had been expressly excluded from attending, I could not serve as the responsible on-site representative listed in the safety paperwork. That detail mattered most. Within 20 minutes, my phone started lighting up. The first call was from the venue manager, Carla Jensen. Carla had run private events for 15 years and had the kind of voice that could freeze a room. "Daniel," she said, "I need to know whether this is personal or procedural." "Both," I said, "but the procedural part is what affects you. I'm not permitted to attend. I can't supervise load-in, sign off on the suspended floral piece, or manage vendor sequencing." She was quiet for half a second. "And the clients know this?" "They do now." "All right," she said. "Then I'll document the file." That was Carla's way of saying the fantasy was over. The caterer called next, already irritated. The florist texted me 3 times in a row asking if Nora understood that the install window couldn't be moved without labor penalties. The rental company wanted to know who was authorizing final counts. I gave them all the same answer. Not me. I didn't rant. I didn't editorialize. I just stepped aside and let the truth become administrative. Then I went home, packed a carry-on, and left for the airport the next evening. At 6:12 on Saturday morning, while I was sitting at the gate with bad coffee and a blueberry muffin I wasn't going to finish, my mother sent the first text. "Call me right now." At 6:16 came my father. "Where are you?" At 6:19, "Nora, Carla says you pulled out. What the hell are you doing?" I turned the phone face down and listened to a little girl 2 seats over explaining clouds to her exhausted father. He nodded at everything she said, as if she were an expert. It was such a gentle seam that it made the panic vibrating inside my phone feel even smaller. By 6:30 the calls were stacking on top of each other. My mother, then Nora, then my father, then Evan for the first time since Christmas. I answered that one. He didn't say hello. "You need to fix this." I looked out through the terminal glass at the plane taking shape in dawn light. "Good morning to you too. Don't play games with me. The venue is saying the floral installation can't go up without the listed rep. Catering is holding service revisions because nothing was signed. Nora is in tears. She seemed composed when she told me not to come." He exhaled hard through his nose. "This is exactly why my parents had concerns about you." I actually smiled. "Because I read contracts? Because you're vindictive." "No," I said. "Vindictive would have been staying involved long enough to let you think everything was handled. I gave everyone notice. You're blowing up our engagement party over hurt feelings." I let that sit there for a second. Then I said, "You and Nora used my money, my vendors, my time, and my name on legal documents. Then you removed me because I didn't fit your tone. Those are not hurt feelings. Those are consequences." He lowered his voice, probably because people were around him. "Listen carefully. My parents are already here. If this event falls apart, you have no idea how bad this will look." There it was. Not apology. Not accountability. Image. I said, "I know exactly how it will look." Then I ended the call and boarded my flight. I kept my phone off until I landed in Maui. When I turned it back on in baggage claim, it came alive so violently it startled the woman next to me. 32 missed calls. 19 voicemails. 40-something texts. The oldest from my mother was frantic. The newest from Nora was pure rage. You knew this would happen. You did this on purpose. You've humiliated me. I hate you." In the middle of all that was one message from Carla Jensen. "For your records, suspended floral feature was canceled. Client arrived without approved alternate plan. Catering reduced to static service. Event ended at 8:40 p.m. after disturbance between hosts. Final incident report available if needed." I stood there with my suitcase handle in one hand and read that 3 times. After disturbance between hosts. That was Carla being professional, which meant it had been ugly. I checked into the hotel anyway. For 2 days, I did exactly what I had planned to do. I slept. I walked by the water early in the morning before the beach got crowded. I ate grilled fish from a place across from the marina and sat on the balcony at night listening to air conditioning units click on and off across the courtyard. My body was in Hawaii. My mind was still in Nashville, but farther away each day. On the 3rd afternoon, Sam called. Sam and I had been friends since college. He was one of the only people in my life who had never treated my steadiness as a public utility. He worked in local investigative reporting now, mostly business and municipal stories, and he had a habit of getting very calm when other people lied. "You need to see something," he said. He sent me a screenshot. It was a Facebook post from Nora, set to public, already shared dozens of times in a Nashville neighborhood group and then beyond it. Her profile photo was cropped from some winery visit, all soft makeup and filtered sunlight. The caption started with the words I never thought I'd see attached to my own name. "Sometimes the person who hurts you most is family." I kept reading. She wrote that I had become unstable in the weeks before the party, that I'd been controlling, obsessive, emotionally inappropriate, that I had abandoned her on purpose to punish her for being happy, that vendors had been confused because I gave conflicting instructions, that she and Evan had tried to protect me privately, but my behavior had escalated. She ended by saying she was praying I would get help and warning others in the event industry to be careful with me professionally. She used my full name. She used the name of my company. And within an hour of seeing it, I got an email from a hotel group in Franklin canceling a meeting I'd had lined up for a renovation bid. That was the moment the problem changed. Up to then, it had been family cruelty. Ugly, yes, but containable. Now it was defamation. I called Mary Ann from the hotel balcony. She picked up on the first ring. "Send me screenshots," she said after I read the post aloud. "Everything. Comments too, if they identify your business." I lost a meeting already. That helps. Helps. It helps because damages are easier to show when idiots move quickly. There was something deeply comforting about the way she said idiots. By evening, I had a folder on my laptop with timestamps, screenshots, canceled inquiries, and a copy of Nora's public post saved 3 different ways. Sam started collecting what he could too. He sent me 2 more screenshots from people who knew the venue manager, one from a florist I'd worked with before, and one from a woman who had actually attended the party and commented, before deleting it, that the event had looked disorganized well before guests arrived. Then Sam asked the question no one in my family had bothered to ask. "What do you want? Not what do you feel? Not what do you fear? What do you want?" I looked out at the dark water and answered honestly. "I want to correct it. Quietly if possible. Completely if not." "Good," he said. "Then don't rant online. Don't defend yourself in comment sections. Let the paperwork talk." So that's what I did. The next morning, Mary Ann drafted a cease and desist notice. It was clean, direct, and much colder than anything I could have written. It demanded immediate deletion of the post, preservation of all related communications, and written retraction of false statements concerning my mental health, professional conduct, and alleged sabotage. She sent copies to Nora, to Evan, and to my father because she had correctly guessed he was still trying to steer things behind the scenes. Then she asked Carla for the incident report. Carla sent it the same day. The report was 7 pages long. No adjectives, no drama, just sequence. Load-in delays began at 2:05 p.m. because the host party failed to provide an authorized site representative for the suspended installation. Revised menu selections had been communicated by groom representative directly to catering on June 15th without corresponding updates to service timeline. Hostess arrived at 5:12 p.m. and objected to missing design elements that had been canceled or delayed due to lack of approval signatures and missing payments. Verbal dispute between host couple occurred near bar at approximately 7:48 p.m., audible to guests. Several guests departed immediately afterward. Event concluded early at the request of host family. I read that report twice, then once more. The hidden thing I hadn't known I needed wasn't some dramatic witness or secret recording. It was a boring, perfectly written institutional document from a woman who cared about process more than personalities. That report changed everything, because it did what truth often does best when it's written by professionals. It removed emotion from the argument and left only structure. Marianne sent a second letter attaching the report and noting that any repetition of the allegations would be treated as knowing defamation in the face of contemporaneous contradictory evidence. By sunset, Nora's post was gone. Evan called me that night. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice had changed, less polished, more tired. My parents have seen the legal letter. I assumed they would. This is getting out of hand. No, I said. It already did. He was quiet for a moment. Then he tried a different angle. Nora was upset. People say things when they're hurt. She told the public I was mentally unstable and professionally dangerous. She didn't mean it literally. Then she can retract it literally. I heard him shift, maybe stepping outside, maybe checking whether someone was listening. What do you want from her? There it was again. Not what happened. Not what is true. What do you want? I said, a written retraction. Sent to the same places she posted the lie. A direct message to the client contact whose meeting was canceled, stating that her allegations about my business were false, and repayment of the money she signed for on June 10th. He sounded genuinely thrown by the last part. Repayment. She owes me $8,372. She doesn't have that kind of cash right now. That sounds like her problem. He muttered something I couldn't catch, then said, "You're really doing this." I looked at the incident report on the table beside me, at the reimbursement sheet Marianne had already scanned into the demand packet, at the ocean beyond the balcony rail. No, I said, I'm really done pretending this is normal. When I flew back to Nashville 4 days later, my father was waiting in my office lobby. He stood up when I walked in, newspaper folded under one arm, jaw set hard. He looked older than he had a week earlier. Not frail, just less certain of his own authority. My receptionist looked at me carefully. I nodded once and told her it was fine. He followed me into the conference room. For a minute, neither of us sat down. Then he said, "You've made your point." I put my bag on the chair and took off my jacket. Have I? This legal posture is unnecessary. Unnecessary is calling your son unstable because your daughter can't tolerate embarrassment. His nostrils flared. Watch your tone. I almost smiled. 40 years old, and there it was. Watch your tone. I sat down first. That bothered him more than if I'd stayed standing. He remained on the other side of the table for a second before finally taking the chair opposite me. The room smelled faintly like coffee and printer toner. Through the glass wall, I could see one of our coordinators walking a client toward the sample shelves. Real life continuing. My father flattened the folded newspaper on the table, though he never opened it. Nora is devastated. The engagement is under strain. Her name is being dragged around town. She posted my name first. She was emotional. She was reckless. He leaned forward. You always do this. You turn everything into a matter of principle until there's no room left for grace. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, very quietly, no. What I did for years was make room. I made room at Dad's birthday when she dropped the reservation. I made room when she nearly lost the condo. I made room when she used my credit card to hold this venue. I made room when you called asking for $10,000 after she excluded me. I made room when Mom told me to help from a distance. There has been nothing but room. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I slid the reimbursement sheet across the table first. His eyes dropped to Nora's signature. Then I slid the incident report after it. Then a printed copy of her deleted post. Then the email canceling my client meeting. The truth came out in the room the way it should have from the beginning. Not in one dramatic blast. In layers. Document. Signature. Timeline. Consequence. My father read in silence. By the time he reached the client cancellation email, some of the hardness had drained out of his face. Not remorse exactly, but the beginning of forced recognition. He said, "She told your mother you sabotaged the event. She told a lot of people that." He rubbed once at the bridge of his nose. "And Evan made menu changes?" "Yes." "And the suspended install couldn't proceed without you?" "Correct." He sat back. For the first time in my adult life, my father looked less like a judge and more like a man who had backed the wrong story too early and couldn't reverse out of it cleanly. He said, What if she agrees to retract everything and pay you back over time? I thought about the years underneath that question. About every time the family solution had involved me absorbing the cost because I was the stable one. About how stability gets mistaken for infinite capacity when people are selfish enough. Then I said, that addresses the money, not the access. He looked up. Access. I'm done being available on command. I'm done being discussed like a resource. She doesn't come through my work. She doesn't get my help. You and Mom don't use family to bypass boundaries anymore. If that can't be respected, then there is no relationship to manage. The room went very still. He had probably expected anger. Maybe negotiation. Maybe a speech. What I gave him was procedure. That was harder for him. After a long silence, he asked, "Are you cutting us off?" I answered carefully, because I wanted the sentence clean enough to live with later. I'm ending contact with anyone who thinks my usefulness is more important than my dignity. He looked down again at the papers. When he finally stood, he seemed heavier somehow. I'll speak to your mother. That would be wise, I said. He gave me a tired, almost disbelieving look, as if he still couldn't quite accept that the son he'd always counted on to absorb impact had stopped volunteering for the role. Then he left. Nora sent the retraction that evening. Not graciously, not fully, but legally enough. She posted that earlier statements about my professional conduct had been made in distress and were inaccurate. She acknowledged that vendor issues had resulted from planning and communication failures on the host's side. She sent the same correction to the client contact who had canceled our meeting. Marion made sure the wording was not flattering to her. As for the money, I got half within 2 weeks, wired from an account my father probably pressured her to use. The rest came in installments over 3 months. Every payment was late. Everyone arrived. Evan didn't last much longer. I heard from someone in the venue world that his parents were furious about the public mess, the legal letters, the early end to the party, all of it. He and Nora limped along for another 6 weeks before he ended the engagement. No grand scandal. No dramatic exposure. Just a man who cared too much about appearances deciding she had become bad optics. That part didn't satisfy me the way people might expect. It just felt accurate. My mother called several times after the retraction went up. The first message was tearful. The second was practical. The third said, "I hope you're happy." I deleted all 3. I never answered. Over the next year, my life got quieter. That was the real reward. Not revenge. Not victory. Quiet. The Franklin Hotel Group eventually rescheduled the meeting after receiving Nora's correction. We got the bid. 6 months later, that project led to 2 more. I hired a second coordinator, then a junior operations analyst. Work became steadier, cleaner, more deliberate. I stopped taking on anything that relied on guilt as currency. Personally, I got smaller in the best way. Fewer obligations. Better ones. Dinner with friends who didn't need me to rescue the evening. Sundays without family group texts. Holidays spent where affection didn't come with assignments attached. Once, about 11 months after the party, I saw Nora by accident. I was meeting a client downtown for breakfast. She was across the street outside a Pilates studio, talking to another woman, thinner than I remembered, still beautiful in a careful way, but flatter somehow. Less certain. She saw me at the exact same moment I saw her. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she started to step forward. I gave one small nod. Not warm, not hostile, just acknowledgement. And I kept walking. That was the whole thing. No speech. No final reckoning on a sidewalk. No delayed apology spilling out into traffic. Just a boundary still standing. Later that afternoon, sitting in my office with the door open and the usual hum of work around me, I realized I no longer felt the need for her to understand what she had done. I no longer needed my parents to admit the full pattern. I no longer needed to be correctly seen by people who had benefited for years from seeing me incorrectly. That was the calmest truth of all. Some structures collapse because they were built carelessly. Some survive because they are reinforced after the damage is finally visible. And some need to be left behind altogether, not because they never mattered, but because living inside them costs too much. My family taught me something I wish I had learned younger. Love that depends on your usefulness is not love you can rest in. It's a contract with no ceiling and no end date. I don't sign those anymore.